Good morning, Hillsboro. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my way. Well, it may be, it may not be, but I know it's all in God's hands. I'm going to read from Esther 9, chapter 9, verse 1. Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and edict were about to be carried out, they're about to kill off the Jews. On the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, the reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. You might read Esther. It's not that long a book, but it'd be a good read today. Brothers and sisters, today we're diving into the story that I just read a tiny bit of from the book of Esther, a story of God's perfect time and his unwavering protection and his ability to turn the tables on those who seek to harm his people. In Esther 9:1, we read about a day that was supposed to bring destruction to the Jewish people, but instead it became a day of triumph. This isn't just ancient history, it's a reminder of how God works in our lives today. He's still the same as he was then. So there was a plot, and God took care of it. Let's set the scene. There's a fellow named Haman, a man filled with pride and hatred. He had convinced King Ahasuerus to issue a decree to annihilate the Jews, get rid of them. He hated them. He was an Amalekite. He painted them as a threat, a scattered, rebellious people who didn't follow the king's laws. His plan, it was meticulous. His confidence, it was unshakable. The decree was sealed by the king. The date was set, and Haman and his allies were ready to celebrate what they thought would be their victory. But God, he works in his ways. Here's the thing. Haman, he didn't account for God. He didn't realize that the God of Israel is a God who sees, a God who hears, and most importantly, a God who acts. Through the courage of Queen Esther and the faithfulness of Mordecai, God intervened. The decree was reversed, and the very day Haman had planned for destruction became a day of deliverance for the Jews. And oh, Haman, up the gallows he went. It was a day. It was a day. Yeah, the church, God's people, us pilgrims, we got enemies. But we do have God's protection. This story isn't just about Esther and Mordecai. It's about us, God's people. The church. The church has always had enemies. From the days of Cain to this very hour, there's been a spirit of opposition against God's people. Sometimes it's subtle, like whispers of doubt or division. Other times it's blatant, like persecution or injustice, but no matter how it comes at us, no matter the form, the enemy's goal is the same. To shut us up, to silence us, to shut up the church, to stop the gospel, to weaken our faith, destroy our witness. But here's the good news, and there is good news here. God is still in control. Just as he stepped in for the Jews in Esther's time, he steps in for us today. He's still working. He may not always act on our timeline when we want it, but he always acts at the right time. He doesn't get ahead of himself, and he never falls behind. He's a God who crushes the plans of the proud, and he lifts up the humble. Yeah, he's a God. He's a God who turns what the enemy meant for evil into something good for us. Always. So there's some lessons here for us from this book of Esther. What can we learn? Well, here's three things. God's timing, it's perfect. The Jews were on the brink of destruction, but God intervened at the last moment. Sometimes it feels like we're in the same boat, like the enemy's closing in and God is nowhere to be found, like he's asleep in the back of the boat, Jesus. Yeah, he's not. But remember, God's delays aren't denials. He's working behind the scene. He's preparing a victory we can't yet see. Yes, quite a victory coming. God's power is greater. Yeah, we got to learn that too. Haman, he thought he had the upper hand, but he was no match for God. No matter how powerful the enemy seems, God's greater, so much greater. He can turn the tables in an instant. He can take what looks like defeat, turn it into a victory. And one more lesson. God's people are called to be courageous. Esther and Mordecai, they didn't sit back. They didn't just sit back and wait for someone else to do something. They stepped up, even when it was risky. They prayed. They fasted. And they took action. As God's people, were called to do the same. We're called to do it. We're called to stand firm in our faith, to pray without ceasing, and to trust that God will fight for us, because He will. So how does this apply to us today? Here are three practical takeaways. Well, trust God. Trust God. While you're waiting, trust in the Lord. If you're in a season of uncertainty or struggle, don't lose hope. God's working, even when you can't see it. So trust His timing. Trust His plan. It's far better than any plan you could dream up. And stand against the enemy. The enemy may try to intimidate you, but don't back down. Put on the full armor of God and stand firm in His truth. And we gotta be a voice for the vulnerable. Just as Esther spoke up for her people, we're called to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. Whether it's fighting injustice, sharing the gospel, or simply being a light in the darkness, let's be bold in our faith. Let's get out the gospel. And so, brothers and sisters, the story of Esther reminds us that no matter how dark the situation, God is still on the throne. Prayer changes things. He's the God who turns the tables, who makes a way where there seems to be no way. So let's trust Him. Let's stand up, let's stand firm, and let's watch as He works wonders in our lives and in our world. Amen to that, pilgrim. Well, I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to get back to doing some reading. I got a lot of reading to do. So I would ask you to please like, share, subscribe, and donate if you feel so led. And I'll end it with God bless, pilgrim. Have a blessed day with Jesus. You couldn't spend a day with a more wonderful person. God bless.